Nothing can stop me. No man can stop me. No virus can stop me. Death cannot stop me. Stand back. It's time for whatever this is. Oh, thank you, Bella. Hi, everybody. I've been sick. And I'm still sick. Yeah, let's see. So, the thing that posted to Discord is a thing that I wrote. So it just automatically does that when I go live. Also, if everything is working, you can do BC, right? But you can now also do, this is just kind of a test thing that I'm working on. I won't go into the details of it, but this is a complicated, different thing behind the scenes. Okay, never mind. It's not working. Interesting. Why is that? Oh. Context deadline exceeded. Well, that's something. Oh, there it goes. Well, that's the first time that's happened. Ah, the city of Bayou La Batre, capital of Alabama. Ah, the city of Montevallo. The town of Magnolia Springs. All right, well that's that. Oh, and it doesn't do the gold border. Oh, thank you for the water. That's so kind of you. Anyway, I feel better than I have, but still sick. And yeah, it does do that too, because that's because there's two chatbot implementations basically that are running as Tape Boy. So the original Tape Boy is like, I don't know what you mean. What command is that? And the second Tape Boy is like, yes, let me run this command. All right. They're both the same Tape Boy. It's a sort of, you know, there's a non-duality to Tape Boy. We are all Tape Boy. Tape Boy is within us all. Good deal, Green Day. I hope your tests go well. Okay. Oh, I should open up the VCR thing. Anyway, I'm doing all right. I don't really feel like talking to anyone though, because I'm sick. That's how you feel when you're sick, right? So let's just watch Lewis and Clark, shall we? Okay. I figured we could pull this up and look at it. This was sent in by Brad a long time ago. America, a look back. The Journals of Lewis and Clark. On May 4th, 1804, Lewis and Clark set out to explore and map a western route to the Pacific. This film revisits their historic journey. The explorers traveled along the Missouri River until winter forced the party to settle in with the Mandan Indians. In the spring, Sacagawea guided the expedition along the Yellowstone River to the Rockies. They crossed the Rockies and the Cascades, Finally, they reached the Pacific coast, then headed for home. The expedition covered 7,689 miles in 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days. America, A Look Back, is a chronicle of this country's birth and growth into nationhood, spanning the years from George Washington to JFK. This series is hosted by NBC News anchor Tom Brokaw. It's won many awards, and it's from 1989. I love Tom Brokaw. All right, well, it's time for this tape. Channel 2. Cool. And so I'm gonna make sure this is playing. Wait, what's going on? Yes. Yes, it is playing. So I'm going to activate that. And then I'm also going to do another test of a command that tape 1 will not recognize. Set tape. Okay. Nope. Cannot read properties of undefined. All right. That's good that I'm finally able to test all this stuff. What are you talking about, man? New NBC News Productions. In B, C. CNB, CNB Run, CNBC. Why is this so... It's so sepia, and it's like it's glowing. I think it's just what the VHS is doing. All right.
I'm Tom Brokaw. Just upstream from St. Louis, on the Illinois side of the Big Muddy, is a granite monument. There, at Camp Wood in 1804, began a journey which captured the imagination of a fledgling nation. President Thomas Jefferson convinced Congress that out there, beyond that frontier, is where America's future lay. Jefferson himself never got farther west than Virginia. Two men would lead what Jefferson called a group of outdoorsmen capable of bearing bodily fatigue in a pretty considerable degree. 29-year-old Meriwether Lewis, 33-year-old William Clark. Their story, their adventures, more colorful than fiction, were the subject of a blue ribbon documentary from NBC News. The narrator is the late Lorne Greene, who won international fame in the Bonanza television series, which ran from 1959 to 1973. The story has been told many times, but the best telling is in their own words.
The Corps of Northwestern Discovery, as Lewis and Clark's band of explorers called itself, set out in the spring of 1804 up the Missouri River from its mouth near St. Louis to finish the job started by Christopher Columbus. And the party at this time numbered 45 men, including Clark's Negro slave, York. And there was also Scannon, Lewis's 160-pound Newfoundland dog.
Oh my God, that's a giant dog. Also, yes, this is very old.
The 55-foot keel boat that carried them was built for the swift and treacherous waters of the Missouri.
In addition to the fact that Manifest Destiny was kind of...
called pirogues completed this wilderness armada.
Kind of shit as a concept.
Each of the men had been handpicked by the two captains. Lewis stated his requirements simply enough.
They should be healthy, unmarried men, accustomed to the woods and capable of bearing bodily fatigue in a pretty considerable degree.
A generous Congress had appropriated $2,500 for the journey. Among their weapons, they had 15 of the powerful new Harper's Ferry rifles, a swivel gun for the keel boat, to impress the Indians, an experimental gun that operated on compressed air, 24 tomahawks and scalping knives. The medicine chest held gum camphor, tartar emetic, rhubarb, Glauber salts, and Dr. Rush's bilious pills, also a tool for bleeding the sick. The 14 bales of trade goods included calico, tobacco, fish hooks, glass beads, peace medals for the Indians, and 30 gallons of that great pacifier, whiskey. Captain Clark thought the supplies a trifle meager.
Everything complete with the stores we thought ourselves authorized to procure, though not as much as I think necessary for our road across the continent.
William Clark was Lewis's personal choice as co-captain. An immensely likable Kentuckian, he was 33, 6 feet tall, red-haired, and outgoing. Though largely self-taught, he had a natural genius for geography and for leadership. Meriwether Lewis was 29 and well-educated by the standards of that day. Like Clark, with whom he had served in the Indian Wars on the Ohio frontier, he was 6 feet tall and ruggedly built. Unlike Clark, he could be moody and withdrawn. Lewis came from the landed gentry of Albemarle County, Virginia. He was a familiar visitor at Monticello, the home of Thomas Jefferson, being a neighbor and protege. And when Jefferson became president in 1801, he made Lewis his private secretary, and together they planned the Western expedition that Lewis was to lead. The United States in 1801 ended at the Mississippi River. Beyond lay the vast territory of Louisiana, owned by France. It stretched from the Mississippi to the Continental Divide and was as yet virtually unexplored.
Come in.
The most far-seeing statesman of his time, Jefferson was determined to send an expedition that would discover the long-sought Northwest Passage across the continent and establish the United States as a continental nation. This was his third attempt. Here, in his study at Monticello, he had gathered together all that was known about the West. Much of this information was wishful thinking. No one knew for sure the Rocky Mountains were really there, but the time was ripe to find out. For in 1803, Napoleon Bonaparte unexpectedly sold all of Louisiana to the United States for $11 million. Jefferson wanted precise, detailed knowledge about all aspects of this fabulous acquisition.
The object of your mission is to explore the Missouri River and such principal streams of it as may offer the most direct water communication across this continent. You will take observations of latitude and longitude with great pains and accuracy. Other objects worth notice will be the soil and face of the country, the animals, the minerals of every kind, the climate, prevailing winds, the dates plants put forth or lose their flower, and times of appearance of birds, reptiles, and insects. You will make yourself acquainted with the names of the Indian nations, their numbers, language, occupations, diseases, morality, and religion. Your own discretion must be left the degree of danger you may risk.
But the toughest adversary was the river. To Clark, the upstream struggle against nature and the beauties of the country were simply facts to be noted.
The party is much afflicted with boils, and several have dysentery, which I contribute to the water, which is muddy. The country about this place is rich, well-timbered, and abounds in elk, deer, and bear. The mosquitoes and ticks are numerous and bad. July 4th, 1804. Ushered in the day by a discharge of one shot from our bow piece. Proceed on. Thermometer stood at 96 above. One man very sick, struck with sun.
George Druyer, hunter and scout, kept them amply supplied with fresh meat, mostly deer at this stage. After Druyer, the ranking hunters were the Kentuckians Reuben and Joseph Field, and John Coulter. Lewis himself walked on shore a good deal, making copious notes on the plants, trees, and wildlife. Clark charted the river's course and mapped the land. The land was lovely, its dangers taken as a matter of course.
Joseph Field got bit by a snake, was quickly doctored by Captain Lewis with a poultice of bark and gunpowder.
Day after day, the men put more of the mighty Missouri behind them. On July 21st, 69 days and 600 miles out from St. Louis, they passed the mouth of the Platte River and met their first Indians, the Otos. The captains delivered peace medals, whiskey, gunpowder, and a speech by Lewis.
Children, commissioned and sent by the great chief of the 17 great nations of America, we have come to inform you that your old fathers, the French and Spaniards, have gone beyond the Great Lake toward the rising sun, from whence they never intend returning. Children, our great chief has become your father. He has commanded us to tell you that you are to live in peace with all white men. Children, do these things which your great father advises and be happy. Avoid the counsel of bad birds. Follow our counsels, and the Great Spirit will smile upon your nation, and in future ages will make you outnumber the trees of the forest.
Like most other wild things, including the trees, the Otos did not prosper. In fact, they're extinct. As the expedition moved on, two men deserted. One of them, a French waterman appropriately named La Liberté, was never found. Moses Reed, a soldier, was caught and brought to justice a few days later. Clark recorded the event in his blunt style.
Proceeded to the trial of Reed. He confessed that he deserted and stole a public rifle, shot, pouch, powder, and ball, and requested that we would be as favorable with him as we could, which we were, and only sentenced him to run the gauntlet 4 times. It being Captain Lewis's birthday, the evening was closed with an extra gill of whiskey and a dance until 11 o'clock.
There would be no more desertions. But a few days later, there was a death. Near what is now Sioux City, Iowa, Sergeant Charles Floyd died of a ruptured appendix. He was the only member of the expedition to lose his life during those 28 months in the wilderness. Clark was with him at the end.
Sergeant Floyd died with a great deal of composure. Before his death, he said to me, "I am going away. I want you to write me a letter." We buried him with the honors of war on the top of a bluff, 1/2 mile below a small river to which we gave his name.
Moving on into South Dakota, they came to the high plains. Lewis filled his journal with notes on its beauty and wildlife.
This scenery, already richly pleasing and beautiful, is still further heightened by the immense herds of buffalo, deer, elk, and antelope, which we see in every direction. The antelope were extremely quick of sight. Their flight along the ridge before me appeared rather the rapid flight of birds than the motion of quadrupeds. The petits chats are justly named, as they resemble a small dog in some particulars. They sit erect near the mouth of their holes and make a whistling noise, and when alarmed, step into the hole.
No white man before or since have ever seen such a profusion of game. In 1800, 60 million buffalo roamed the plains. In 1890, 1,000 were left. 1 million buffalo were killed just for their tongues. Lewis instructed his hunters to kill only what was necessary for food, and these men could eat 7 or 8 pounds of buffalo steak at a sitting. It was hard work, but it was also good living, as Clark made clear.
Everything in prime order. Men in high spirits.
Now it was September, and for 4 months, the men of the Lewis and Clark expedition had struggled up a river that was increasingly full of shoals and sandbars. Each day, though, they became better disciplined, more closely knit, and this was crucial, for now they were nearing the country of the Teton Sioux. These fierce Plains Indians had systematically terrorized white traders and closed the upper Missouri to nearly all traffic from below. On the morning of September 25th, across the river from present-day Pierre, South Dakota, there began a tense 3-day ordeal with the Teton Sioux. The Americans, outnumbered 10 to 1, knew that any sign of weakness on their part could be fatal. Clark tells what happened.
Met in council at 12 o'clock, and after smoking, agreeable to the usual custom, Captain Lewis proceeded to deliver a speech.
Children, shut your ears to the counsel of bad birds, lest by false step you should bring upon your nation the displeasure of your great father, the great chief of the 17 great nations of America, who could consume you as the fire consumes the grass of the plains.
We gave a medal to the Grand Chief called Black Buffalo. The second chief, called the Partisan, is bad. Invited those chiefs on board to show them our boat. We gave them 1/4 glass of whiskey, which they appeared to be fond of. Sucked the bottle after it was out and soon began to be troublesome. The Partisan assuming drunkenness as a cloak for his rascally intentions. I went with those chiefs and 5 men in one of the pirogues to shore. 3 of their young men seized the cable, declaring I should not go on. Their gestures were of such a personal nature, I felt compelled to draw my sword and spoke in very positive terms. The Indians withdrew.
Surprised by the white man's refusal to be bullied, the Tetons changed their tactics. The next 2 days and nights were filled with dances, speech-making, and feasts of roasted dog meat. Black Buffalo paid homage to the U.S. flag by sacrificing to it some choice parts of the dog. The Sioux also showed off their latest battle trophies, 25 captured Omaha squaws and boys, one of whom warned the Americans that the Sioux were plotting their death. Clark's journal that night was terse.
All prepared for anything that might happen. No sleep.
The showdown came that morning. Lewis told the chiefs that his party was moving on. Suddenly, some Indians seized the keelboat's bow line. For a moment, it was touch and go. Clark trained the swivel gun on the Indians and flung some tobacco to the chief. The Sioux backed down. And for the next 80 years, they fought their losing battle with the white man. The next Indians they met navigated the Missouri in round boats covered with buffalo hide, called bull boats. They were the Arikara, and this is how Clark described them.
These people are dirty, kind, poor, and extravagant. They live in warm houses built in an octagon forming a cone, the top of which is left open for smoke. They appear to be peaceful, and they are not fond of spirituous liquors. A curious custom with the Sioux, as well as with the Arikaras, is to give handsome squaws to those whom they wish to show some acknowledgement to. The Arikaras we put off during the time we were at their towns, but two handsome young squaws came up this evening and persisted in their civilities. The Indians much astonished at my black servant, who made himself more terrible in their view than I wished. He told them that before I caught him, he was wild and lived on young people, and he showed them his strength.
Equally strange to the Arikara was the white man's justice. Private John Newman, found guilty of mutinous expression, was sentenced on October 31st to 75 lashes.
The punishment this day alarmed the Indian chief very much. He cried aloud. I explained the punishment and the necessity of it. He also thought examples were necessary and said he made them by death. His nation never whipped even their children from birth.
Winter came down suddenly and hard as the expedition pushed on into what is now North Dakota. They had traveled 1,600 miles in 6 months. It was time to find a winter camp. At the Knife River, they came to the villages of the Mandan and Minatari Indians. The Mandans were handsome, even-tempered, highly intelligent. They liked white men, and they exist no more. Lewis and Clark decided to build their winter quarters, Fort Mandan, a few miles to the south of what is now Bismarck, North Dakota. And that cold winter, they learned what they could about the unknown country to the west. Fort Mandan was finished by mid-December, none too soon. The temperature on December 12th was 38 below zero. The Missouri was frozen solid. The Indians looked to Lewis and Clark for help in hunting the buffalo, on which they depended for food and clothing and all the necessities of life. Hunting parties came back with frostbitten feet and fingers, but all winter long, whenever the buffalo came near, the men went out after them. Here's a typical entry in Clark's winter journal.
The Big White, Grand Chief of the first village, came and informed us that a large drove of buffalo was near, and his people were waiting for us to join in the chase. Captain Lewis took 15 men and went out. His party killed 10 buffalo. 3 men frostbit badly.
Antelope were difficult to hunt. Buffalo, always patient to die, were the staple. In fact, for 70 years, the dream of Western expansion survived on buffalo meat. The winter also had its diversions. On New Year's Day, 1805, Lewis gave the men leave to visit the Mandan villages and join in the celebrations. The Indians also enacted a rather curious rite, which Clark, mindful of Jefferson's orders to observe Indian morality and religion, recorded in his matter-of-fact way.
The young men who have their wives each go to one of the old men and with a whining tone request the old man to take his wife, who presents herself naked except for a robe. The girl then takes the old man, who very often can scarcely walk, and leads him to a convenient place for the business. If the old man or a white man returns to the lodge without gratifying the man and his wife, he offers her again and again. All this is to cause the buffalo to come near.
On February 11th, Lewis and a Canadian trader named René Gissom helped an Indian woman give birth.
This was the first child this woman had born, and her labor was tedious and the pain violent. Mr. Gissom informed me that he frequently administered a small portion of the rattlesnake, which never failed to produce the desired effect. She had not taken it more than 10 minutes before she brought forth.
The mother's name was Sakakawea. She was a captured Shoshone whose people lived at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. That winter, the captains learned that they would need horses to cross the Rockies. The Shoshones had good horses. Sakakawea might be of help in finding them. Her husband, a French trapper named Charbonneau, had already joined the expedition as an interpreter. The captains decided to take Sakakawea with them when they headed west. In March, the Missouri ice let go. It was the signal for the long push to the Pacific. The keelboat was returning to St. Louis, loaded with Indian artifacts, plants and seeds, notes, and even a live prairie dog for President Jefferson. From here on, it would be 31 men, the Indian woman and her baby, in 2 pirogues and 6 dugout canoes. The captains took stock on April 7th, the day of departure, each in his own manner.
Spirits high, generally healthy, except for venereal complaints.
We are now about to penetrate a country of at least 2,000 miles in width, on which the foot of civilized man has never trodden. The good or evil it has in store for us is yet to be determined.
Through April and most of May, the Corps of Discovery made steady progress, up to 27 miles a day. They reached the mouth of the Yellowstone River April 25th. They reached the Milk River May 8th, the Musselshell May 20th. The captain's journals are full of admiration for the men.
The men are compelled 1/4 of their time to be in the water, even to their armpits, and the water is yet very cold. Added to this, the banks and bluffs are so slippery that they are unable to wear their moccasins. Their labor is painful and great, yet those faithful fellows bear it without a murmur. The country on each side of the Missouri is rich and beautiful. Met with great numbers of prairie hens, as they are called by the English traders. These birds appear to be mating.
The party also met the silver-tipped grizzly bear, the most powerful and dangerous animal in North America. Lewis described the encounter.
The men discovered a large bear lying in the open ground about 300 paces from the river. and 6 of them went out to attack him, all good hunters. They got within 40 paces of him unperceived. 4 men fired, and each put a bullet through him. In an instant, this monster ran at them with an open mouth. The 2 who had reserved their fire discharged their pieces. Both struck him. This, however, retarded his motion for a moment only. The men, unable to load their guns, took to flight. So enraged was this animal that he plunged into the river only a few feet behind them, when one of those on shore shot him through the head and finally killed him. These bear being so hard to die rather intimidates us all.
Late in May, the party entered a strange, dreamlike landscape. Lewis called these formations the Castle Rocks.
The hills and river cliffs we passed today exhibit a most romantic appearance. The bluffs of the river rise to the height of from 200 to 300 feet, in most cases nearly perpendicular. The water, in the course of time, has trickled down the soft sand cliffs and worn them into 1,000 grotesque figures, which, with the help of a little imagination, represent elegant ranges of lofty, freestone buildings, some almost entire, with their pedestals and capitals. As we passed on, it seemed as if those scenes of visionary enchantment would never have an end.
This is the only long stretch of the Missouri, which remains today much as it was when Lewis and Clark came through. This visionary enchantment may soon be ended for all time. There are proposals to build dams here.
Monday, June 3rd. This morning we formed a camp by 2 large rivers. An interesting question now is to determine which of these rivers is the Missouri. To mistake the stream at this period would probably so dishearten the party that it might defeat the expedition altogether.
This junction with the Marias River was a stunning surprise. Their information from the Mandans had not led them to expect a major tributary at this point. For 5 days, the party studied the 2 rivers. The men all favored taking the North Fork, but Lewis and Clark believed the river to the southeast was the Missouri, its water having the appearance of a mountain source. They left one pirogue and headed southeast as the captains ordered, not without apprehension. While the canoes labored up the river under Clark's direction, Lewis went ahead by land to find the great falls of the Missouri. Failure to find them would mean they had taken the wrong river. And here, Lewis had his first real look at the Rockies.
An august spectacle, made more formidable by the recollection that we had them still to pass.
They must cross the mountains before snow closed the high passes. Every day counted.
I proceeded on about 2 miles when my ears were saluted with the agreeable sound of a fall of water. A roaring too tremendous to be mistaken for any cause short of the great falls of the Missouri. I wish I might be able to give to the world some just idea of this truly magnificent and sublimely grand object, which has from the commencement of time been concealed from the view of civilized men.
The great falls of the Missouri, that sublimely grand object, also proved to be the most terrible obstacle encountered so far on the journey. For the river fell 412 feet in 10 miles. It took 31 days of back-breaking labor under a blistering sun to complete a 17-mile portage around the falls.
To state the fatigues of this party would take up more of the journal than other notes which I scarcely find time to write down. The men have to haul with all their strength, weight, and art. At every halt, these poor fellows tumble down and are so much fatigued that many of them are asleep in an instant. But no man complains. All go on with cheerfulness.
On July 4th, 1805, the Great Falls were behind them. The expedition resumed its race to cross the Rockies before winter. Clark took 4 men and went ahead in search of the Shoshone Indians. Lewis stayed with the boats.
This evening we entered much the most remarkable cliffs we have yet seen. These cliffs rise from the water's edge perpendicularly to the height of about 1,200 feet. The river appears to have forced its way through this immense body of rock. From the singular appearance of this place, I call it the gates of the mountain.
The expedition had seen no Indians since they left Fort Mandan, only abandoned camps and distant smoke signals. The Indians may well have watched the white man's advance with a sense of foreboding. 3 years later, the fur trappers, the first to follow in Lewis and Clark's footsteps, would be here in force. For this was the richest beaver country in America. The days of the Plains Indian, as well as the beaver, were numbered. Lewis's party reached the Three Forks of the Missouri on July 27th. Here, that great river divides into 3 smaller streams. The captains agreed to name them after the President, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Secretary of State. And today we know them as the Jefferson, the Gallatin, and the Madison Rivers.
I halted the party on the larboard shore and ascended to the point of a high limestone cliff, from whence I command a most perfect view of the neighboring country. We are now several hundred miles within the bosom of this wild and mountainous country, not knowing how far these mountains continue or where to direct our course to pass them. We begin to feel considerable anxiety with respect to the Shoshone Indians. If we do not find them, or some other nation who have horses, I fear the successful issue of our voyage will be very doubtful. However, I still hope for the best.
Finding no Indians at the Three Forks, they struggled on up the swift, icy Jefferson. The role of Sakakawea on the expedition has been heavily romanticized, but in fact the Indian woman recognized only an occasional landmark. However, on August 8th, Lewis reports, she pointed out an important one, Beaverhead Rock.
The Indian woman recognized the point of a high plain to our right, which she informs us is not very distant from the summer retreat of her nation. I determined to proceed with a small party until I find the Indians who have horses, even if it should cause me a trip of a month.
Sick with fever and an infected ankle, Clark led the boat party up the Jefferson. Lewis, John Shields, Hugh McNeil, and the indispensable Druya followed an Indian trail into the mountains. On August 11th, at today's Horse Creek Prairie, they sighted a lone Indian on horseback, almost certainly a Shoshone. Lewis made peaceful overtures, but at the last moment, the Indian, apparently frightened by so many white men, whipped up his pony and disappeared. Bitterly disappointed, Lewis and his little band kept following the Indian trail west. The next day, they reached the Continental Divide between the Atlantic and Pacific slopes of the Rockies. They were at Lemhi Pass.
2 miles below, McNeil had exultingly stood with a foot on either side of a little rivulet and thanked God that he had lived to bestride the heretofore deemed endless Missouri. We proceeded on to the top of the dividing ridge from which I discovered immense ranges of high mountains, still to the west of us.
Descending from Lemhi Pass, The party moved on following Indian signs, and on the morning of the second day, Lewis records,
"We had marched about 2 miles when we met a party of about 60 warriors mounted on excellent horses who came in nearly full speed. These men embraced me very affectionately in their way, frequently vociferating the word, ahie, ahie. That is, I am much pleased. I am much rejoiced. We were all caressed and besmeared with their grease and paint until I was heartily tired of the national hug.
They called this Camp Fortunate because here the expedition had found the Shoshone Indians and horses to get them over the Rockies. Lewis and Clark had traveled 3,096 miles, mapped all of it, noted the flora and fauna, the water courses, the mineral deposits, recorded Indian languages and customs, and kept the expedition intact. Ahead of them lay the Rockies, the Pacific, and the return trip next year. On August 18, 1805, Meriwether Lewis observed his 31st birthday.
This day I completed my 31st year. I reflected that I had as yet done but little, very little indeed, to further the happiness of the human race or advance the information of the succeeding generation. I viewed with regret the many hours I've spent in indolence. But since they are past and cannot be recalled, I dashed from me the gloomy thought and resolved in future to double my exertions and at least endeavor to live for mankind as I have heretofore lived for myself.
By a coincidence that no dramatist would permit himself, the Shoshones that Lewis had found were Sakakawea's own people, and their chief, Kameawait, was her brother. Kameawait told them of a trail far to the north used by the Nez Perce Indians to cross the mountains. This trail was very bad, he warned. They would find no game. Nonetheless, the captains set out to find it. They were led by an old Indian named Toby and transported by 29 horses bought from the Shoshones. Now, it was a land expedition. For 10 days, they traveled north. Old Toby led them over Lost Trail Pass from the Salmon to the Bitterroot Valley. And here the game was scarce. The captains dipped into the dwindling rations of dried corn. Where the Nez Perce Buffalo Road came down from the mountains to the Bitterroot Valley, they paused for 1 day at the site called Traveler's Rest to prepare for the ordeal ahead. Always visible to the west were the jagged peaks of the main Bitterroot Range of the Rockies, which still had to be crossed. On September 11th, they followed the Lolo Trail due west into the Bitterroots. Nothing they had faced so far was as bad as the next 9 days. 180 miles through what one trooper called the most terrible mountains I ever beheld. Clark's journal tells the story.
This day passed over immense hills and some of the worst roads that horses ever passed. It began to snow about 3 hours before day and continued all day. We proceed on up the mountains, steep and rugged as usual. High, rugged mountains in every direction as far as I could see. Nothing to eat but berries. We're compelled to kill a colt for our men and selves to eat. We encamped on the top near a bank of old snow. We melted the snow to drink and took our horse flesh to eat.
Here, at the place now known as Indian Post Office, the windswept ridge is over 7,000 feet high. To mark the trail, the Nez Perce Indians left piles of stones, which are still there today.
I have been as wet and cold in every part as I ever was in my life. Indeed, I was at one time fearful my feet would freeze in the thin moccasins I wore. The want of provisions, together with the difficulty of passing these immense mountains, has dampened the spirits of the men and induced us to resort to some way to revive them.
While the main party continued as best it could, Clark went ahead with 6 hunters to find food. They broke free of the mountains and found the Nez Perce on the warm western slopes at Wei Prairie. Lewis and the others got there 2 days later. His exultation was evident.
The pleasure I now feel in having triumphed over the Rocky Mountains can more readily be conceived than expressed.
The Nez Perce were the most intelligent Indians Lewis and Clark had met since the Mandans. They had splendid horses, some of them distinctively marked like today's Appaloosas. The captains established cordial relations with the local chief, Twisted Hair. The friendship struck up here lasted for 70 years, until a long succession of betrayals and broken promises forced the Nez Perce to revolt. The United States Army then destroyed them. The Nez Perce tribe lived along the Clearwater River. The members of the expedition cut down some huge ponderosa pines, and the Indians showed them how to hollow out the trunks by fire in order to make canoes. By October 5th, they had 5 dugouts ready. Waterborne, once again, they set out on the last leg of the journey. And now it was downhill to the Pacific. At times, too much so. Old Toby, their dauntless mountain guide, had no stomach for the rapids. Clark noted his leave-taking.
We were informed that our guide had left us and been seen running up the river. We could not account for the cause of his leaving us without receiving his pay or letting us know anything of his intention.
Once free of the Clearwater Rapids, they made fast time. By October 10th, they were 60 miles down the Clearwater to its junction with another big river that they called the Lewis. Today, it's the Snake, and the twin towns on either side of the fork are Lewiston, Idaho, and Clarkston, Washington. Game was still scarce. The men took to buying dogs from the Indians. This diet suited everyone but Clark.
All the party have greatly the advantage of me, inasmuch as they all relish the flesh of dogs.
As they moved toward the Pacific, the Indians became more sullen, hostile, and horribly infested with fleas. Some of them had already been exposed to the white man's culture in the form of trading ships that plied the Pacific coast. From here on, Lewis and Clark would see more and more brass kettles, trade blankets, and other evidences of civilization, but no more Indians they could like or respect. On October 16th, they came at last to the broad Columbia, the great river of the West. There was little excitement. Too many rivers and too many hardships lay behind them, and the end not yet in sight. Clark's journal comment was terse, as usual.
The river is remarkably clear and crowded with salmon.
In October, they portaged around the terrible Celilo Rapids and Falls of the Dells, where the Columbia cut its way through a series of lava cliffs. Industries have nearly obliterated this once mighty torrent, and that remarkably clear river is polluted today and no longer crowded with salmon. The river grew steadily wider and more majestic, and the weather got steadily worse, rainy and cold, with thick fogs that delayed them for days at a time. It took them 7 days to cross Gray's Bay, where the river widens to 15 miles. The heavy swells made some of the wilderness conquerors seasick. Wet, exhausted, and undernourished from their diet of salmon and dog meat, they finally rounded Chinook Point on November 15th, nearly 2 years after leaving St. Louis, and saw before them the Pacific surf breaking on the shore. Clark, laconic to the end, recorded the great moment.
I landed and formed a camp on the highest spot I could find. This, I could plainly see, would be the extent of our journey by water.
Lewis's journal for this date, if it exists, has never been found. We can only guess what was in his mind as he stood at the Oregon coast. The great goal won, the expedition intact, the continent crossed. Just as we can only guess what was in his mind 3 years later, when he took his own life in a lonely shelter on the Natchez Trace in Tennessee. Perhaps, for a visionary like Lewis, success itself had a melancholy sound. Finding the last frontier marked the end of a long era, the era of American innocence. From this moment, there could be no turning back from the dangers and vexations of world power. They built a small fort near the coast where they would live through the miserable, rain-soaked winter. And it was at Fort Clatsop that Lewis and Clark began putting their rough notes in order and setting down all that they now knew of that vast and fertile wilderness which they had been the first to cross and which would soon exist no more.
The Lewis and Clark expedition carried them through what are now 11 states. The story has inspired more than 300 books and several movies. Even today, the legend is told in granite and metal along the way at commemorative campsites, parks, and historical roadside markers. From St. Louis to Astoria, Oregon, around the next bend may be a county, a highway, a college, a grade school, a restaurant, a motel bearing the names Lewis and Clark. I'm Tom Brokaw, and this has been another in the series, America, a Look Back.
Yeah, the strange mix of jubilant and dark imagery set to this triumphant MIDI trumpet music. It definitely is a little odd. Okay. So we could watch. It sounds like that was depressing. It was some fascinating history. Like, for its era, I didn't find the tape that bad. It's more just that the history was... The history itself is, you know, full of dark themes and human foibles and evil. Oh shit, this isn't rewound. I was gonna suggest we watch this video about earthquakes. But it's not rewound. So what if instead we watch a tape that is rewound and that is so much fun? How about Little Lord Fauntleroy? Let's see, it says 1990 on the tape. Why, oh no. It actually seems to be pretty well reviewed. No. This is about a silly boy. Let me read you the description. The Earl of Dorincourt, an austere British aristocrat, grown bitter with age, summons to his castle his young American grandson, Cedric Errol, whom he has never met. Although the Earl despises all things American and refuses to accept the boy's mother, he is determined to train the youngster, his only living heir, to succeed him in British society. But the proud Earl of Dorincourt is not prepared for the flood of emotions that stir within him when young Seedy reaches out to his grandfather with unquestioning love and trust, and to rich and poor alike with unconditional caring. Then suddenly Seedy's birthright is challenged, threatening to destroy the Earl's dream for his grandson. A superb cast, headed by Alec Guinness and Ricky Schroeder, brings this classic story to life. I'm also keenly interested because we're doing a D&D thing. Haley is DMing for us, and the party includes me and Haley's brother and sister-in-law, and her brother is playing a character that is Little Lord Fauntleroy. He is a precocious bard, and I know nothing about the character, so this will help me to just understand thematically what that's going for. I don't think he's seen the movie either. There's apparently like a film version in the 30s that's more famous, but this is the 90s feature film for families version. Okay. I'm still sick. Hi. Hope you're doing well. Please enjoy Little Lord Fauntleroy. I'm going to run this command, which I think will also fail, but that's okay. And then I'm going to go make coffee. I do not like the giggling. Star Maker. Oh my God, what a logo. That's beautiful. It's a practical thing.
Your grandson's mother. I'm not interested in the woman or her messages. The less I hear about her, the better.
I'm very much afraid you'll have to hear this, my lord. She refuses to accept the income you offer.
Refuses? How dare she?
Well, she says that since relations between you are not friendly...
Does she expect friendship, this sly, conniving, mercenary American?
One can scarcely call her mercenary, my lord, since she won't even accept the money you offer.
Done for effect, Havisham. She hopes to make me admire her character up...
Okay, fine. What was it earlier where Dick was saying, well, I'll be blowed.
Look after you.
Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Mellon.
Oh, not Mrs. Mellon, your lordship. Just plain Mellon.
You're not plain at all. Me and my friend Dick would say you're smashing.
If you'll get up now, Mellon, we'll...
And I do need to see it. Again, all right. Sorry, I didn't capture the first "I'll be blowed," and I need to, and I regret that.
Mama knows I love my grandpa and that he loves me, but I am not going to be rich or be an earl. So there you are.
Well, I'll be blowed.
Now wait, there's more. My grandpa's in a terrible state because he don't like the lady, but he'll get over it, I'm sure. I'm sure. I will write...
Distributed in 1994 by Feature Films for Families. So this is not an original low-budget Mormon production like some of the other ones. This was I don't know if this was released in theaters or not. I didn't notice any egregious, like, cropping or anything. Why is it just showing us a phone number? Anyway, I guess that's the phone number for Feature Films for Families. Yep, it's on the back here. Murray, Utah. I'm not calling Feature Films for Families. Feature Films for Families. Do they still exist? I don't know. Anyway, let's I think I'm gonna call it. 1 p.m. seems like a good time to end it. I could stream more, but I'm sick and I don't want to. But let's get to the Parents Guide. You may wish to discuss the following with your family. Question 1. What did C.D. and his mother do individually to show that they both felt the same about less fortunate people? Oh, this is such a 90s spin. Number 2, C.D.'s kindness was influenced by his mother's example. How has your family's good Mormon influenced you for good? No one had ever inspired the Earl as C.D. did. Why do you think C.D. had such an influence on his grandfather? I can't even remember if his name's Cedric. His nickname is... Did they call him C.D. or SETI? SETI, I think. SETI's mother told him, "The world should always be a little bit better because a man has lived. Must you be in a position of power to make a difference in the world?" I like that one. The world should always be a little bit better because a man has lived. All right. It is a head scratcher. So we had Lewis and Clark, and we had Little Lord Fauntleroy. Of the two, I think Fauntleroy was a real winner, a real crowd pleaser. Had a good time with this stream. Thanks everybody for being here. Someone said something about rating. Oh no! Broken Ghost. Oh, there it is. It was afraid to show it. Tom Tom the Fox. Tom Fox. Okay. No, that's fine. I can go back to. Can rewind to the first. I'll be blowed. Let's see what else we got going on. Foop. It's not fooping still. That's a problem. God damn it. All right. We're fooping. Oh, right. I have to do something like that. It's foop time, baby. Yeah. Never heard of Waldo. Never heard of New Bern. Lounsborough, I think that's up north. Waldo again. Deatsville. Newville. What are these places? Get out of here with that British Columbia nonsense.
Here we go. I'll put in the tape and we'll have 8 clicks
Here,
at the very
here's some
beginning.
better background music.
Hello.
This is a rare time where I'm actually rewinding a tape that we just watched. As I've mentioned before, I am the greatest monster in VHS history, ironically, because I have hundreds of VHS tapes, none of which I have rewound when I'm done with them. I forgot how much that backing track
With the
slaps.
tape. Remember, there are 8 clicks before we start. Here we go. 6, 7, 1, 3, 4. Now take it up to A and A.
Found the grocer. I'm really interested in the I'll Be Blowed.
Here go, Rob.
I think, was it here?
Melting pot small.
So.
Okay, well, I I can find the I'll be blowed on my own.
If y'all keep it to yourself.
If we're ready to raid.
I call my mind to yours sometimes, too.
Well, I'll be blowed. It's time to end the stream. Thanks, everybody, again for being here. Go watch Tom if you want to. We'll raid him. That's his username. Take it easy, friends. See you next time. Oh, what great timing. The chat broke right at the end. All right. Cool. See y'all.